Hello there. Hi, and welcome back to the channel. There's been quite some time since I've done a book review. I think I did the last one in March, so I think like 4 months have passed since. This was supposed to be a monthly thing, but we do the best with what we've got. And I apologize for missing a couple of months. Things have been a little busy lately, but I'm happy to get back to the swing of things. Over the last few months, my reading pace has slowed down a little, so I didn't maintain the same pace that I was doing in the earlier months, but I've still managed quite a few books that I've read in the past few months, and we'll discuss them in this video. All of the books I've read last month, I think they share a few characteristics. Number one, I've read physical books this time, so every book I've read is a physical book. It isn't a e-book and it isn't an audio book, which constitutes most of my usual reading in a month. And I think a lot of why I'm able to read fast is because I listen to a lot of audiobooks, but that hasn't been the case in the last few months. And all of the books that I've read have either been like bad or like good. I haven't really read an average book in these months. So let's go through the list and hopefully you'll find some interesting takeaways. Alright, cool. Let's begin with this one. It's called Factfulness. It's by Hans Rosling, who is a Swedish medical professional. It's a book which relies a lot on data and data visualization. So, the argument that this book makes is that most of the world suffers from inherent ignorance about the realities of the world. In fact, the world is so ignorant that if you were to put the world's top most experts in healthcare and put them through questions about global health, and these are multiple choice questions, and then you put a group of chimpanzees who don't know anything about the global healthcare system, but they would pick one of the options in random. In most cases, the chimpanzees would outperform the global health experts. If you have, say, three options for each question, the probability that a chimp will get it correct is 33%. On an average, the group of chimps over a larger number of questions will score 33% on a test. The experts will score less. And this is something that the author has observed in each of the meetings that he has done, in every conference that he's attended, in every single place that he goes to. He finds experts in a particular field always get the questions wrong, but the other recurring trend is that they get it wrong in the negative sense. So if there is a statistic that depicts the world in a more negative sense than it really is, then every single time the experts will pick the more negative statistic than what is the real positive one. So the author claims that most of the world suffers from inherent ignorance and inherent fear and inherent anxiety about the world, and he uses this book to dispel all of those myths, to use statistics and to use graphical illustrations to convince us how the world isn't really that bad. I didn't really like this book. I had a couple of issues. Number one, the author claims to go through a large spectrum of the human society. He only really goes through healthcare. He doesn't much cover anything else. Well, he talks about poverty a little, but not much. Number two, I never had that problem to begin with. So the author keeps screaming at my face that the world is very ignorant and it doesn't believe that the world is actually nicer than, so the world believes that the world is very bad, but it's actually very nice. But I never believed the world is very bad. So most of the things that the author was screaming at my face, I never disagreed with to begin with. So stuff like the average life expectancy had gone up, and the percentage of population living under the poverty line has reduced, and that women now have fewer babies. I know all of that, and I agree to all of that already, and the author just keeps screaming it at my face. Number three, the author has really bad standards for what he thinks is going better. I mean, he talks about how a lot of people have moved out of poverty, but then he describes the poverty that he thinks people have moved out of, and that poverty is depressing. So if that is the only improvement the world has made, then it kind of contradicts his point about improvements in the world, because that really is not something to be proud of. Lots of issues, really. I feel like for me, this was a book which covers a topic that there wasn't a need for a book to cover. Like personally, I never felt the ignorance, or I never believed the world to be worse than it is. And the author really, I think, lacked more nuanced approach. This is a book that the equivalent of this would be a man screaming in your face telling you the world is great, but only talking about healthcare and only saying things which doesn't really prove his point. Also, you never said that the world is bad in the first place. So, not a big fan of the book, but I guess if you think the world is going poorly, either watch a Coca Cola ad or read this book. In pretty much the same lanes. I guess both in the same vein and in the opposite vein. This is a book by Rabindranath Tagore. Well, it's not a book by Rabindranath Tagore. It's a book that collects all of the works of, and it's very shiny and it's a hardcover book with golden pages. It collects all of the important works of Rabindranath Tagore, so all of his important poetry, his short stories, his novels, and puts it into one large omnibus. This is called the greatest works of Rabindranath Tagore, and this was one more of the books that I was reading. In both a similarity to Factfulness and a depart, and I guess in a way it's opposite. My problem with Rabindranath Tagore stories is primarily that they are very bleak. Well, they are sad, but they are also incomplete. Most of his stories always have a kind of bad ending, and I don't mind that. I think a lot of stories, bad endings done well, can be very effective, but his stories just have like a kind of bad ending, and also most of his stories feel incomplete. And I feel like that might be a art style, and that might be something that's just a trademark of the author. Myself, it just he makes a few very interesting worlds and he writes a few very interesting stories, but then he doesn't finish them, and it just ends, and it ends in a sour note all the time. Um, so again, I feel like it's hard to criticize a book just because it continues to have sad endings. But I just wasn't I didn't find it worthwhile to continue. So I read some of them, some of his stories. I didn't read all of them. One of his stories in particular was really, really, really great. It's called Jibito Mritto in Bangla. In English, the translation would be something like living or dead, dead or living, the living dead, something like that. What Read it if you can. It's really, really great. Nothing else was um, as good. There was one more, but yeah, I mean, he has a few good stories, but not enough for me to keep going and finish the whole book. So again, a little bit on the underwhelming side. Okay, since I've already began with the books that disappointed me, I guess we'll just complete the chapter. This is My Gita by Devdutt Patnaik. This was probably the worst book I've read in the past few months. I love the Gita. I love it has a lot of inherent wisdom and there's lots to learn from it, especially as someone who loves the Mahabharata. My Gita seems like the butchering of the Gita and done in a very bad way. One of my great, I guess, appreciation for Devdutt Patnaik was that his Mahabharata and his Ramayana, he wrote the Mahabharata and Ramayana, but then he gave his own analysis and commentary at the end of it, which seemed very nice. He has taken it multiple steps too far, and now in my Gita, it's Devdutt Patnaik talking, and then sometimes he'll just sprinkle in a phrase from the Gita without context to prove his point. So instead of it being Gita and then Devdutt Patnaik's analysis, it has been Devdutt Patnaik's commentary and out of context Gita's phrases thrown in just to support his viewpoints. Also, he contradicts himself multiple points at multiple points throughout the book. I feel like, has taken the entire meaning and essence out of the Gita, and one might argue that this is kind of what he meant by saying my Gita, that everybody's Gita's analysis is different, and what we are getting is his version of the Gita. But I don't like his version of the Gita. It seems very contradictory. It seems very confusing. It seems completely all over the place and not organized at all. Although Devdutt Patnaik has made a very sophisticated attempt to organize it, it just seems much more disorganized now. And it seems less like the wisdom of Krishna and more like the propaganda of Devdutt Patnaik. Um, I wasn't a big fan. This doesn't change much about it. It doesn't change my opinion of Devdutt Patnaik altogether. I still believe his version of the Mahabharata was one of the better ones, or maybe the best ones that I've ever read. I would recommend if you are looking to read the Mahabharata, you read his Mahabharata, the Jaya, but do not read my Gita. I think he has written a bigger Gita, like the Gita, and his book is called Shyam. Maybe that is the one I should have read, but my Gita is not a very good book in my opinion. Okay, now that we've covered the bad ones, let's do some of the great ones. This is The Godfather, and the next three books are all books that I've loved. The Godfather, solid, great crime mystery novel. In fact, fun fact about The Godfather, I finished about. This is a pretty big book. This is how big it is, and the font isn't really very big either. So there's lots of content in the book. There's nine sub books in total. I read, I think, 70% of that book in one train journey. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake the entire night to finish The Godfather, and I love it. It's just good, very good old uh, crime mystery gang book. Um, Interesting thing about The Godfather is that it just feels right. A lot of crime thrillers feel well, they draw their, I guess, attractiveness by throwing in stuff that wasn't supposed to happen. So there's a standard narrative going on, and then something will happen which will shock you, and then something else will happen which will shock you, and somebody will do something that you didn't expect them to do, and it just that's how a lot of crime thrillers and I think mafia movies derive their attractiveness from. What I like about The Godfather is that it all just seems right. Nothing seems out of place. Nothing seems extraordinary. Nothing seems like something that wasn't supposed to happen but happened. And for those of you who've watched the movie and not read the book, you might really disagree with me on this one. You might feel the opposite about this. But if you read the book, everything seems predestined. Like there's a lot of build up, there's a lot of background stuff that's going on, there's a lot of build up to anything that happens. So everything seems to be very planned out and thought out and flowing in a certain way. So the book never really, to me, it never was something that threw something off or did something extraordinary or did something that wasn't supposed to happen. But I just love the book for it. I think there's a lot of beauty in creating a world which is engaging in itself so much that even when nothing extraordinary happens, you're just really invested in the world and you follow the world through the end. Throughout the book, I was heavily invested into the family, and the Corleone family, and the book flowed and ebbed and the story went on and I was hooked, and nothing was extraordinary and yet everything was beautiful. So great book, solid classic mafia novel. I recommend this to pretty much anyone. The interesting thing about this is that the movie isn't. I didn't like the movie, and the movie is supposed to be really great. Like I think the movie was too rushed. Lots of things were taken out. I've had a theory for some time how uh, you can't have a piece of art where both the book and the movie is great. I think maybe Harry Potter is an exception, but in I haven't read Harry Potter nor have I watched it. So, but most other things I thought Godfather would be another exception because the movies won so many awards. I didn't like the movie at all. I really dislike it actually, but the book is great. Please read the book if you get the time. Okay, next, 0 to 1. This is another book I read. I liked this not as much as The Godfather, but I liked it very much to be not an average book. I didn't like it enough for it to be a great book. Um, the thing about 0 to 1 is that I have tried reading it twice before and I didn't like it, so I put it down. But then, a few weeks ago, I started my own marketing consultancy in a way, which is kind of its own startup. And then I started reading 0 to 1 and I really loved it. Like it's a book on how to run a startup. It says notes on startups or how to build the future. And and there's lots of valuable information there. I think a lot of people claim 0 to 1 is a great book for not only those who are trying to build startups, but also those who are just trying to succeed in life. I would disagree. I think there's some value for people who just want to read it to get ahead in life, but really the value comes when you're trying to build a startup. You'll understand a lot more nuances. There's lots of really good business strategy, I think. Lots that talk about how the world works, how markets work, how competitions work, how products work, how teams work, how to structure compensation, how to structure marketing, how to structure a great team. So stuff like that. And I think it's a great book for somebody who wants to build a startup, as it says, but not necessarily a great book for other people, which is, I think, a departure from what the standard reception of this book is, which is that it's great for everybody. But still, solid, very good book. So if you're interested in either you're on the starting stage of building a startup or you want to start a startup pretty soon, I'd recommend 0 to 1. The final book, and probably my most favorite book, even more favorite than The Godfather for the last, since the last time I released one of these videos, is not in my possession right now. It's in my brother's room. It's called The Almanack of Naval Ravikant. The Almanack of Naval Ravikant is Naval Ravikant's wisdom packaged into 3 sections. It's healthy, wealthy, and wise, or is it? I'm sorry. I made a mistake. It's not healthy, wealthy, and wise. It's about wealth and happiness. And then at the end, he talks about philosophy. So materialistic wealth and then spiritual wealth, or materialistic happiness and spiritual happiness. And I really love that book. Naval Ravikant has amazing wisdom. And I like that book also, I think, and this is something which now a lot of people might relate, or maybe they might, is he shares a lot of my philosophies. I had never read Naval Ravikant before, but a lot of his opinions, a lot of how he approaches life, a lot of, what he preaches is identical to what I believe in and what I preach and what I think of life in general. He just does it in a much more structured way, and as someone who has, I'd like to think of it in a way where I have beliefs and I'd like to try them out. He has had the same beliefs, has tried them out, has observed the results, and knows how these beliefs and how these beliefs function and how they translate into executable action. And he has written about that in a very easy to understand and yet very wise way. Um, it's truly incredible. One of the highest compliments I can give it is that so far, I'd like to think that the blueprint for my life, the manifesto for my life of what I was trying to build, of what I was trying to create, comes from a book called The 4 Hour Work Week, written by Tim Ferriss. Amazing book. Probably my favorite book in the self improvement genre, and I read a lot of self improvement books, so I'm guessing I should hope that's a big compliment coming from me. The Almanack of Naval Ravikant could very well be a addendum to that manifesto, so to speak. It is amazing. It is my thoughts and ideas and opinions, but expanded 3000x. Naval Ravikant seems like somebody who I would want to become, or at least his ideas is something I would like to become. His mindset is something I'd like to become. As I said, he divides his book in 2 parts: the wealth and happiness. Me personally, I loved the wealth section very much. Like, I really love the wealth section. I like the happiness section, but I feel like it's not something that is super. Like, I think there are differences of opinion on how both of us approach happiness in some places, but I still love that. My father, interestingly, loved the happiness section and liked the wealth section. So I feel like, and if you take my age and you take my father's age, Naval Ravikant's age falls somewhere in between. So I feel like as people grow older, they move on from wealth to happiness. So just an interesting experiment. But I really love the Almanack of Naval Ravikant, and if you want to read an addendum to how I want to lead my life, of my beliefs and my values, and how I approach the world, how I see the world, read the Almanack of Naval. It's close to the core philosophy. Well, it is the core philosophy, but anyway, read it. Just read it. I really love that book. Highly recommend. Sorry for making this video too long, and sorry for being a little all over the place right now. It's 2:45 a.m. In the morning. But for those who are watching and those who have been watching consistently, thank you so much. And yeah, as always, let me know what you're reading. Let me know if you have any book recommendations, and hopefully, I'll see you again soon. Goodbye and have a great day.